That time in my life during therapy session, I would have never gone to therapy, like an actual therapist, and
What
had a
actually made you
conversation.
go?
Because I was having a mental breakdown. Like I was questioning my life, I was questioning everything.
Hey, what's up? It's your boy Ill Will. You're checking out Enemy, and I'm joined today by my guy right here, NF. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
So, am I to call you NF, Nate, Nathan? What do you prefer?
I don't care, man.
You don't care?
It's Nate? I
Nate.
don't know.
I'm gonna go with Nate.
All right.
So, I mean, I guess the first thing I gotta do is congratulate you.
What do I call you?
I'm Ill Will.
Ill Will.
Ill
All right,
Will, man. I need to congratulate you. #1 album, The Search. You beat Chance the Rapper, bro, who was he was meant to be. It was the bookie's favorite. Were you expecting that?
I never know what to expect, man. Putting out music is, I always tell people, like one of the most exciting and most like nerve-wracking times for me, just because I put so much time and like emotion into this thing,
Right.
and then I release it to the world to basically give their opinion of it. And so I love it, but at the same time, I just never know what it's going to do. So I'm just thankful that the fans showed up and bought the records and excited to tour it. So,
So it's a case of always expect the unexpected.
well, here's what I do. I'm a very negative person.
Really?
Yes. So I try to convince myself if I think the worst will happen, if anything better than the worst happens, I'll feel better.
Okay.
That's actually a lie that I tell myself, but I do kind of live like that sometimes where I'm like, oh, there is a good chance it won't do good because of this, or this might happen, or whatever. But the truth is, it definitely, like, it's just a hard thing to do sometimes, like putting out an album, especially when it's as personal as it is, or any kind of artist that I feel like you're putting something out there for everyone to look at and have an opinion of.
Right.
And so it's just kind of sometimes nerve-wracking to do that. But I'm glad that it seems like the fans liked it and the fan base is growing and just the shows and stuff, so it's good.
So, I mean, as I just mentioned, Bookie's favorite was Chance to be #1. You managed to get to #1, and there was all this controversy where he went on Twitter to say, that people wanted him to kill himself, all that kind of stuff. Did he reach out to you at all to have a conversation, to congratulate you or anything like that?
No, I don't know him personally, but I will say I feel like the world nowadays is very, I just don't get like the internet anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like people can say whatever they want about him. I don't know him personally, but I think he's a very talented artist. And I think sometimes people get carried away with like stuff they write about people. You know what I mean? If people were writing that kind of stuff about me, and I kind of got my first taste of some of that with this album, it's just, I don't know. I don't like it,
It's
I don't
dangerous.
like it when they do it to other people. I don't like it when they do it to me. So,
I mean, it's pretty dangerous.
yeah.
But
I think a lot of people just make it like this joke now, like, well, it's kind of what you signed up for as an artist, and I guess I don't really think of it that way, but
it's interesting you say that, because this week there was this whole thing about Andrew Luck retiring from the NFL because of injury at 29 years old. And it's like loads of people were booing him when really he was just looking after himself. But they were saying you knew what you were signing up for. But I don't understand where the human compassion is in that. Where's that element? And I guess you guys feel the same way.
Well, I think the internet has just become a place where, because everyone can give their opinion, there's no conversations anymore. You know what I mean? It's just like opinions.
One way.
Personally, I don't think people should have been bashing him like they did about his album. If you don't like an album, I mean, I'm not going to go on someone's page as an adult and
Right.
like, I know it's not just adults, but I'm not going to go on someone's page and be like, your album was terrible.
Right.
Ever. Like, that just like doesn't make sense to me.
And then obviously with you getting to #1, what I just started to notice with all these headlines about you being #1, it was, he's the artist that you don't know, and he got to #1, this mysterious guy. Do you look at yourself as a mysterious guy, as an underdog?
I personally like that people don't know who I am to some extent. But I mean, this was actually a shock to me coming here and playing Germany for like
Really?
4,000 people. Yeah, because I don't come here that often. And so to be able to travel the world and do that. But in this, even in the US, I think if you walk around I was just telling someone this the other day, if you went to like a city, maybe I'm not playing a show there, and you walked into a restaurant and you were like, hey, have you ever heard of NF? I think most people would be like, who? You know, they wouldn't know. But I could go, no, I'm telling you, man. But if I went there and played a show, you know, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 people or more, depending on the city, would come to the show. And so I don't mind that. I like not doing tons of this kind of stuff, like press, but still being able to be an artist and do the stuff that I love to do.
Well, we love being able to do this with you.
Yeah.
We love having this conversation with you.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying in general, it's just something for me. When I put out my album Perception a couple years ago, I had never experienced interviews, like really. Not like real interviews. So when I started doing radio interviews and stuff, I was like, I don't know, man. It was just a weird experience for me, and it was exhausting. I'd never toured that much. I'd never answered the same questions every day or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm also like a pretty deep person, so sometimes I was like, oh man, I wish like if I'm doing interviews, it could go deeper, things like that, you know. So that was just like a stressful, different experience for me altogether. But back to your original question, which I don't remember exactly what it was because we got off of it. But
We're talking about you being an underdog.
Yeah, I think sometimes maybe I am the underdog or just the overlooked
Okay.
artist, and I'm fine with that. At this point, I'm to a place now where I'm just like, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I think the fans love it, and that's what matters. So
You've mentioned it a few times already that you're quite deep, and obviously listening to your music, you know that, and a lot of it is very vulnerable. Is there ever a point where you just think to yourself, do you know what, I really shouldn't be putting this out, or you're scared to? Or was there a point and somehow you managed to kick the doors down and just be like, you know what, I'm gonna do this? Because it's obviously working.
I think being 28 now, as you get older, you look at life differently. So the only thing I would say is, I don't know if there's like massive regrets or anything too specific that I would go into, but I would just say it is interesting to me. Like when you are an artist and you write music, or if you're a person who writes journals about your life or books or whatever it is, it really is like, that's kind of what music is for me. When I go back and listen to my first album, which I don't do very much at all, but every once in a while, like probably once in the past year, I like went back and listened to my old music and I was like, oh my God, this is like...
That was something I wanted to get into, but you're already going there.
Yeah, no, like, but it is like a journal of my life. And sometimes I might listen to something and be like, I feel like I didn't understand this then, or why did I say that like this? Do I feel that way this way anymore? Is this, you know what I mean? An example would be the song about my mom dying when I was like 18 years old. The song that I wrote, I don't regret writing it. Still emotional to listen to. I don't know how old I was when I put that out. Maybe I was like 24, 25. I'm not sure. But being 28 now, looking at that song, I think I just look at that differently.
Right.
That scenario. So I wouldn't say I regret the song. I would say I have more empathy and compassion for my mom than I did when I wrote the song. You know, I felt sad when I wrote the song, but also a lot of anger mixed in, and I think I still have some of those emotions for sure. But now,
Well, it's evident on the new album, because there's the record where you cry at the end talking about your mom.
Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the most emotional songs I'd ever written. And now it's just kind of like, I think because I'm older and I look at life with more of an open mind instead of just what I'm thinking all the time. And I look at that scenario and I think about my mom and like her position that she was in. You know what I mean? So a lot of people, I think, get addicted to things because they're running from something. And I don't know everything, you know, personal about my mom, but I just have a lot more like empathy and compassion because I think my mom had a lot of things she struggled with inside, and I kind of related to my own life doing this as a career and like having one of the roughest mental years last year of my life, you know.
I mean, so just like to interject with a side note, that's why I relate to your music so much, because I have my own issues with my own mother, who has an addiction. So just it's like a thank you to you being able to actually express those types of things, because some of us aren't able to do that and convey it in the way that you do. So it is appreciated, and I'm sure you hear that from fans all the time.
Yeah, I think for me it's just my mom's, maybe your mom's still alive or whatever.
She is.
Yeah, so, and maybe even though she is, you're not able to have conversations. But I just, sometimes the way I think about it, and I would tell people, and I don't know your situation, so maybe this doesn't work at all, but if my mom was here, I would want to, I just wish I could have like an adult conversation.
Right.
Where like, when she died, I was 18 years old or whatever I was exactly. Like I wasn't in a place where I could have ever had legit conversations about life, about, you know what I mean? Because I'm 28 now, and I still am trying to figure out who I am. You know, my album's called The Search.
Yeah,
like
you're still searching.
Yeah, it's like I think everyone in life is looking and searching for something, even if you don't know exactly what it is. You know, whether it's God or it's you're trying to figure out your job, or you're trying to figure out who you are and who you want to be, or who you want to, you know, do you want to get married? Do you want whatever? Like every person in this room, every person in life is like working towards something. And I think one thing I would tell a lot of people, one of the most depressing times of my entire life in the process of writing this album was like after I dropped Perception, and then I was touring and I was doing all these interviews, and I got a #1 on Billboard. It was great timing for me when I put it out, but still I ended up getting a #1 on Billboard, and everything, and my tour sold out. Like I was doing all these things that I dreamed of my whole life. I just did not feel happy about it. And I think that's one of the lowest, that was the lowest point of my whole life, because I think it'd be like your whole life, maybe you had this dream, even if you didn't understand what it looked like. Like a lot of people can say, I want to be an artist, I want to do shows, I want to do touring. But
once you get into it,
you don't really know what that is until you start doing it.
Well, it's like what Biggie said, right? More money, more problems.
Yeah.
So once you achieve that status, more problems come with that.
Yeah, and there's different kind of problems. Some people, I don't really know. I don't really talk to a lot of artists, so I don't really know. But some of the artists I have talked to, like mental health's like a serious thing. You know, like it's a struggle that I think a lot of people have, and music's always been an emotional place for me to write. So you just hear about it a lot in mine. The lowest place I've ever been, touring and doing all that and not feeling anything. And that's what's so interesting about it, is I feel like everybody's chasing that thing that I've been chasing my whole life, except I arrived at it. And I think other people do that too. They're like, hey, I'm going to get this job and I'm going to save money. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have a house.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a kid. I need to save up so I can get this house. Oh, we're going to need this kind of car for this, and like all this stuff. And it makes sense. I'm not like knocking that. I do the same thing. I'm not saying you wouldn't smile or be happy if someone came today and was like, hey, here's $2 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying
you're not
is,
thinking about.
I'm saying like 5 months from now, if money's no longer like an issue for you, and to some extent it'll always there's a lot of things like more money, more problems can become a thing. But like 6 months from now, if you didn't have to work anymore, this all sounds so positive, so this is gonna sound so weird, but if you achieved your goal, or let's say you weren't even given it, let's say you your whole life you were trying to be a musician, or you were trying to write a book, and you're like, if I could just get the #1 selling book, and then you put out a book finally after years and years of work, and it went #1, and you had this little moment of joy or happiness, and then it kind of like went away very quickly. At least for me, I was just kind of left sitting there like, well, what else is there?
And like you say, the new album's called The Search, so that's the next stage.
Yeah.
But like you just said something really interesting about regretting certain decisions you made musically, moving back. I'm Free. Do you regret the album cover?
Oh my god.
You look like Justin Timberlake in 2002. I thought I was watching a JT music video when I saw that album cover.
No, I've actually posted photos, and of course I delete them because they're terrible. I always do that with my fans. I'll like post stuff and delete it, just because it's like a funny thing with my fans. Like anyone who's a hardcore fan has seen me when I used to wear. Well, I talk about it in No Name as well. I don't know if you've heard that, but I talk about when I used to wear like a tie and like a vest and stuff. So,
but you know, there's that screenshot feature.
Oh
People,
gosh,
that ain't going away.
Oh no, that photo.
The internet is forever, bro.
That photo will live on forever.
Yes.
That's for sure.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Recently there was this whole thing on the internet about top 50 MCs, and we know it's a really big thing in rap, and you've spoken about it on one of your records about you don't care about being top 10, etc., etc. I'm not going to ask you to name your top 50 MCs, but do you have a top 5?
I would say Eminem's definitely top 5, if not number 1 for me. Kendrick is amazing. Yeah, I don't know if I have an exact top 5. The other thing is people always ask me who I'm listening to, and it really depends on my mood, and honestly I don't listen to a lot of artists other than what I'm working on for me. Over the past like 2 years, I've barely listened to anybody's music. Like I have some, but you would probably be shocked because when I'm working on my own albums and stuff, sure, if like a new record comes out, I'll listen to it, but barely at all anymore. Just because I'm constantly, either I'm writing my own album or I'm in the studio and I'm constantly listening to beats. Even when I drive down the road, I'm listening to my mixes, I'm listening to the beats that I got, trying to come up with song ideas. I'll write random lines while I'm driving. Like I've written some lines just while I'm driving down the street. I'll talk into my phone while I'm playing a beat. So
a lot of artists do that though, and they say they don't like to listen to other artists when they're creating, because also there's this whole phenomena at the moment of people being accused of plagiarizing when really it might have been inspiration. There's like this thin line. So when you're listening to other people and you're creating...
it's also very hard, I feel like, with rap. I've got to the point now where I'll like write a line and I'll be like, oh, that's clever. And then I'll go and Google and try to see...
Straight onto Genius.
Well, I'll try to see, like, has anyone written this line, or is this different enough, or is this whatever? And still sometimes it's like the line is still, especially with rap, because it's so many words, it's like, it's almost impossible to not do that sometimes. And then I'm just annoyed.
No idea is original, right? Nas said it best, you know, it's really, really hard to get those original...
I think it's weird for me because now I'm in a place where like millions and millions of people are hearing something.
Yes.
When I write it. So coming into this album, it was different for me because with Perception, I had no idea at that point if millions and millions, like millions of people had heard my music, but it was like a way smaller scale for like my album Therapy Session. Then coming into Perception, I never had radio, first of all, so I didn't even know what that even meant really. And I never had millions and millions, like at that level, I guess, consistently listening to a song or my album. So when that record came out, it was just like the first time for me where I was like, whoa. So many people looking at what, you know, it'd be like right now if I was like, hey, write your feelings down on a piece of paper and hold it up. And you might have a scattered around 1 million people hearing it, or like millions of people hearing it, but still not on like this insane level. And then the next year, I'm like, hey, hold up the paper again. And then it's like that year, that was the first time for me. I was like, whoa, all these people. And then I'm not even like this massive celebrity where I'm like one of the biggest artists ever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I went from having like no one to being...
Well, you have a core fan base.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier. I think I've always had I'm a competitive person. So of course, like sometimes I'm like, man,
you're a rapper.
I'm working. Yeah, I'm like, I'm working very hard. Like sometimes I write competitive raps. I like making, I like watching rap battles. Like I just like that side of doing it. But also I've become aware that some people just aren't going to they're not going to put me on a list or they don't take me serious as a rapper. And it's like, that's fine. I still have my core fans and people who care about my music. It's important for me to care about it. Like, what am I writing for me and how do I feel about it? Not just like, what does everyone else feel about it? And that's what gets tricky in this business to me. Coming off Perception to this album, that was a bit of a struggle in the writing process for this, because it was kind of the first time where I'm like, way more people are going to hear this and judge it and give their opinions. But I just came to the realization, I'm like, I need to just write what I'm feeling, and if they want to, that's fine.
I mean, I could nerd out right now because you mentioned battle rap and be like Murder Mook, Loaded Lux, who you got, but instead, because you didn't name top 5 MCs, because it's quite hard to, I'll admit that it's hard for me. For Royce the 5'9" is one of my top 5 FYI, and he's obviously
he's
a
amazing.
Detroit, Michigan, hero, hometown hero.
Yeah, he's amazing.
But what about top 5 M songs?
I'd say The Way I Am.
That cadence is crazy.
That song is ridiculous. I think the Eminem Show is one of the best albums ever. White America, Cleaning Out My Closet, Sing for the Moment. There's so many dope songs. I don't know.
I noticed I don't know if everybody would have caught it, but in the When I Grow Up video, you had the reference to the Marshall Mathers where you're dragging the garbage out.
Oh, I wasn't doing it for that. I was.
But do you know how exact it looks? There was a photograph in that album rollout, and it's a spitting image.
You're talking about the Marshall Mathers LP? Yeah, I know what photo you're talking about, but I wasn't doing it for that. I was working at a fast food place, hauling trash out,
So that was going to be my next question. Before you became who you are now, what regular job did you have?
I used to do electrical work. I ran wires in houses and climbed in attics and crawl spaces.
Did you ever get fired? Or did you quit as abruptly?
I did kind of get gently fired with my boss, who I'm actually close with.
What happened?
Honestly, I just wasn't focused. I wanted.
Did you electrocute somebody?
I wanted to do I wanted to do music, so I wasn't really focused. But the one thing I did find out was, and I gave this suggestion to someone, or if you were like, hey, what's a suggestion you would give to any artist or to help them in their career? And one thing I said was, keep your job while you're trying to do it. I think people are like, oh, you need to just quit your job. And it's for me, I was a perfect example of that. I tried to do music for a year full time, and it was basically like having a store with no product in it. So it's hey, I'm an artist, I want to do a show. It's okay. They walk into your store and it's well, there's nothing in here. There's no music, there's no I was trying to just pay my bills, but I wasn't building a business, I wasn't building a career, I wasn't getting better at writing. I was so concerned every month with paying a bill. After a year of being broke, I think the one year I made $12,000 total, and it was just I can't do anything, I can't pay to record. In the studio I was going to, I wasn't paying a lot of money at all. It's just, I'd go in there and be in there for an hour and I'd be like, oh, we have to finish this as quickly as possible. Here's $40, And so I ended up going back to work. My producer that I worked with from the beginning, basically, Tommy, I'd go to his house and I'd do 4 songs, and I still remember this story. Him and I laugh about it. We were in his driveway, and I was man, so what do I gotta pay you for these 4 songs? And he was he had a square. He was man, what about $500, $600 or something, and for 4 songs, that's nothing. And I just remember sweating, giving him that money, but
just reeling it off.
Yeah, but I look back on it now and I'm I'm so happy I did that, and I'm so glad. He's one of my best friends.
Well, you're here because of that. It's an investment.
Exactly.
It's an investment.
Exactly. So I wouldn't tell people to not take risks. When I signed my record deal, I still worked for 6 months at my job. And it's because I was I don't want to get in the same position again, where it's like, if something goes wrong, I don't want to not be able to pay Tommy or pay someone to keep recording music, because that's always been my biggest marketing tool, is the actual product of being like, hey, no, if you actually listen to this, you might like it. Because you can, I said this in my No Name song. I started getting like a little frustrated because I saw some people being like, oh, this is marketed so much, and it's like, because he's on Capitol or whatever, this is why it's working. And it's just like, I'm not saying some of that isn't helping what's happening, but the music has always been like the driving force with my fans, and they've always been so like connected to the music.
It's the front-facing thing. It's what represents who you are.
It's like people think, sometimes the outside appearance is always interesting to me because I'm so in it. I see the numbers, I see the business. I'm, me and my wife run our online store. Like, we know how things work. Mm-hmm. We know how the shows work, and all the stuff like that. So sometimes it's so interesting to me. It goes back to the underdog thing. I think sometimes people don't realize like how big the fan base is now. The truth is, I'm still going out on a tour where most, if not all the dates, a lot of times have been sold out, and it just keeps growing. And I understand that someday that may not be the case, but I'd rather love, or try to learn to love what I'm doing and get better at my craft and keep putting out music for people that want to listen to it, than try to cater to everyone who like doesn't want to listen to it.
I have to say shout out to Tommy, by the way, because the production, especially on The Search, was what really like grabbed me, because it's so crystal clear. It's so crisp. Man. It's so salute to Tommy.
Well, he's also, there's a few friends that I worked on an album with. My friend Cole, he goes by Saint X. And then Tommy, of course. Tommy's like my go-to for like all the vocals and most of the stuff. Then there's a couple other songs, David Garcia and a guy named Cameron, that help. But Tommy probably does like 80%. And then my friend Cole, he'll like help us make like hip hop jumps for a track, and Tommy will put like the cinematic sound on it.
See, that's the thing. It's very cinematic, and it's produced so well.
He's such an incredible piano player. And he has like, you'd probably be amazed. I mean, I don't know if you're interested in that stuff, but if you actually sat in the studio with him, all the libraries he has of just like horror film libraries, and like he does TV and film stuff.
So it's like scoring.
Yes, it's basically scoring, but from the beginning, him and I were kind of like, hey, let's like, even before he was like really successful in scoring, he was just such an amazing piano player. And nowadays you can buy these string libraries and things. We have some real strings on the record, but also he's got these libraries that are just like The Search. Like, that's one of my favorite songs we've ever done. And the track.
In fact, when you say that, let me ask you this: why is the first track on The Search called The Search and not Intro 4? Is it the next step, the evolution?
Yeah, I think it's the next step. I think sometimes 3 is I don't know. I think 3 was just like it for me. So it was interesting coming into this record. And I said after I did Intro 3, I was like, I'll probably always do a song that's like an introduction, unless I'm doing like a mixtape or something, and, or that type of style. But I'll probably always do a song that's kind of like an introduction to where I am, just because that's kind of what my records have been. The interesting thing to me is, I was thinking about this for this album, because my albums have always been like kind of concept albums, but in the beginning, I don't even think I was thinking about that much. It's just always kind of comes together because I'm rapping about my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the end, I'm always like, even for The Search, I was like, man, I wonder what I'll call this record. And usually I start writing songs, and then it just sort of comes to me. I'll be like, wonder if I did this for a cover. I wonder about this. Oh, this is actually happening in my life, but this is a very unique and interesting metaphor for this. Like the song Nate, for example. That's where I'm rapping to like the younger version of me. That was inspired from checking myself into therapy after I got off the Perception tour, because I was so mentally in a bad place. And there, they had this interesting exercise where you're supposed to like talk to the younger version of yourself.
Really?
Yeah, you literally sit in a room and there's a chair across from you and you're like,
Which is what the cover for therapy was, right?
well, that's for therapy, but this was on The Search.
But I mean, the whole idea of the sat opposite yourself.
Yeah, but
right?
at that time in my life during therapy session, I would have never done that. I would have never gone to therapy, like an actual therapist, and had
What
a
actually made you go?
conversation. Because I was having a mental breakdown. Like I was questioning my life. I was questioning everything. I ended up getting diagnosed with OCD. I didn't know what that even was. I thought it was just like always like you're always washing your hands all the time, or you have to like tap something 10 times before. And that is OCD, but I'm just saying there's different forms of OCD. So
I have a mild form actually.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm very similar.
Yeah.
Mine's the labels need to be facing forward. I
Yeah.
need to tap my Coke can 3 times before I
Yeah.
drink it. It's all those kind of
Well, and
little
I
things.
have the washing hand thing. There are certain, like sometimes if I wipe my nose, like I just did, I might obsess about like, wait, I have to wash my hands before I can do anything. If I don't, like I'm worried about anyone touching what I've touched since I
Right.
did that. You know, I'll have to.
Are you like that in a bathroom? Like if you go to a public bathroom and somebody didn't wash their hands and they went out before you, do you do the whole I'm trying to open the door with my feet, or you get
I've
some
started-
tissue and because it's disgusting?
I've started
bro.
doing that. I've started doing that. The funny thing about OCD, and I'm seeing an OCD therapist, and that's the best thing that I ever did. It jumps from different things. Like it's usually not just one thing. Like my thing is like clothing. If I wear like different clothes, sometimes I can get like anxiety about it. Like when I was on tour, if I didn't wear the same socks or the same color socks that I wore when I had a good show, I would feel really on edge, and I would convince myself like something bad was going to happen during my performance, or like I was going to mess up basically. Like the performance was going to be messed
Yeah.
up because of the socks that I was wearing. And I know some, like if you don't experience it, it's hard to understand. And some people would be like, oh yeah, I mean people go to baseball games and they're like, if I don't wear my lucky hat, they're going to lose. But it's more controlling than that. It's more like I can't function
I understand.
if I don't do it. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let me ask you something else about. So first of all, when did you find God? Because obviously people talk about the fact that you're a Christian rapper, and obviously you do very well on Christian charts. Were you born into it through family, or did you find it later on in life?
I was born into it. I grew up in church. My grandpa was a pastor. But honestly, man, I feel like for the longest time I've been like I don't really like talk to God that much. Just over the past couple years, I probably realized it even more.
But do you have to?
Well, I think nobody has to do anything.
But I mean, if you believe, surely he listens to you whenever you,
I believe
you need him.
I believe there's a God 100%. I think a lot of people do. There's a lot of artists and a lot of people that talk about God in their music all the time. The way that I feel about myself, or I don't know, the way I thought about God growing up, kind of, I don't blame this on God. I think I just myself sometimes, I just don't do it. You know,
Right.
I just don't talk to God. And if you believe there's a God, I don't know why it would be weird, why I wouldn't. Sometimes, like in the most desperate times in my life, I think sometimes I go to God and then I kind of feel guilty about it, you know, because I'm like, why do I only do it when I feel this way,
Yeah.
you know?
So
it's,
I mean,
it's such an interesting thing. I remember when I was young, and I don't know if you believe in God or whatever, but when I was young, because I was brought up in church, I actually went through a stage in my life where I was like, I don't even know if God's real.
you rebel. So that's what
Yeah.
I was about to say. I'm a
Yeah.
very spiritual person,
Yeah.
but I was raised in the church and was forced to go to Sunday school and
Yeah.
things like that, and I rebelled.
Yeah.
But then I realized that God, or whatever you choose to believe,
Yeah, yeah.
is actually in you. So you
Yeah.
choose to,
think
praise
it's
whatever you
very-
want, believe in what you want,
Yeah.
feel how you want to feel.
I think it's very confusing, and I also was just like very judgmental from it. Like I became like just you know, not to go into it too much, but I was just a very judgmental person. And I think that kind of made me, even of myself, kind of like, what's wrong? Like, why do I think this, or why is this way? And like I was saying, I was, I didn't believe. I went through a stage where I was like, well, I don't even know if God's real. Which I think is normal. I think it's if you really sit down, like I think I said earlier, I'm a deep thinker, which sometimes gets me in trouble.
When you're alone with your thoughts.
Yeah, like sometimes it gets me in trouble, and this is just one area, but sometimes I'll sit around, man, and I'll just think about, well, what is the earth, and what, like, how did this get here, and how did, you know, like, that's the way I think. I think in detail about things. I don't know. You know, I think it's very interesting if you really sit down and you really think about life, and you think about how long you live and where you go after you die, or wonder, like, I think a lot of us feel we have the answer, but sometimes I don't know if I really know. What is the answer exactly? I think I know there's a God, you know?
Well, I mean, the reason why I asked is because obviously, being that you're touted as a Christian rapper, I always wondered if there was a conflict for you, being that Eminem is your favorite MC, that growing up, did you ever feel guilty listening to what he was spitting and some of the, shall we say, ungodly things that he was saying? Did it ever play on you?
Well, I don't picture myself as a Christian rapper.
I've read that about you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask if you felt conflicted. That's what everyone likes to write.
Yeah, that's what everyone likes to write. Yes, came up in a Christian home, Christian industry, and I just decided that just wasn't for me for several reasons. I don't have to think the same way someone does to realize that they're a talented person, or be inspired by something. And I think I've grown up my whole life feeling like you need to think like me, or you know what I mean? Right. Or if you don't think like me, we can't get along. You know, I'm married now, and I've come to a place in my life where it's like, we don't have to agree on everything, but I didn't used to think that. I thought you had to believe everything I believe.
Right.
You have to think everything that I think.
No compromise.
Yes, and if you don't, and I'm terrible at compromising on anything. I'm terrible at it, man. I'm like, if you're like, hey, can we do this to do this? And I'm kind of like, well, I was going to do this. You know.
I'm gonna ask your team afterwards how hard it is to
do it. Ask them. No, but seriously, it's like I can admit I'm terrible at compromising. On time, I kind of one of my songs that's out, I talk about my relationship, and I'm not an easy person to be in a relationship. I'm a workaholic. My OCD issues cause issues in my relationship, you know, but I still have my wife, and you know, she loves me and I love her. And just, I'm saying all that to say, I think because the way I was brought up, I kind of became a judgmental person because I felt like everyone has to think like me. And that's just a terrible way to live, because that's impossible and everyone's not going to think like you. But that's okay. I think realizing that that's okay, and I think that's what a lot of people struggle with nowadays, is we think we all have to think the same, and it's just not possible. Like, if you were just sitting right here and you're like, well, I don't believe there's a God. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, we can have a conversation about it.
We can have an adult conversation.
Yeah, it's like, you know, you don't have to believe what I believe. I don't have to believe what you believe. But
we can still be cool. But we can still be cool.
It's great when you can have conversations, and I think people have started getting away from that now. And it's like, not even just about God.
About anything.
I mean, this is the most I talk about God in any interview. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things.
Well, to be honest, we could keep going on and on and on.
Oh my gosh!
But you know what? Your team is signaling. They're like, yo, we need to. I appreciate you coming in and flying over to the UK to come see us here at NME. And my guy,
man. Thank you.